Hello and welcome back. So here is Bloodlines, Chupacabra, Chapter 5, Part 3, The Search. 4 months. That's how long it had been since the last time they were all together. And waiting for those months to pass, knowing that one of them was still missing, was a challenge none of them had ever anticipated. What happened to her, they wondered. What really happened to Laura? By the time a few weeks had gone by, with no trace, no evidence, nothing, the police had quietly given up hope. A recovery was out of the question. The trail had gone cold. Sudden and violent storms had swept through the valley, wiping out the bridge. No way across, no way back. Authorities were left with nothing but dead ends. And Laura had simply vanished. Not many people knew much about her. She had no family to speak of, no one close anyway, just an estranged half-sister, Deandra Bellows, living 300 miles away in California. Deandra hadn't heard a word. She explained that in recent years she had reached out, but Laura never replied, and eventually Deandra stopped trying. The two of them had barely spoken since their mother's death, 2 years prior. They never quite got on with one another, and Laura was a manic depressive. She would go months, sometimes longer, without anyone hearing from her. So in Deandra's mind, she thought the worst. Maybe Laura wanted to disappear. Maybe she decided that things were just too much and wandered off, letting nature take its course. As time passed, the brave trio returned to the world, back to work, back to family, back to the rhythm of their daily lives. But one of them just couldn't shake it. Sandra. Overtaken by grief, consumed by despair, unable to forget what had happened, and haunted by the last words she had spoken to Laura. Those words followed her everywhere. A few weeks after returning home, Sandra received a call from her mother. No reply. Her mother called again and again, left message after message, asked question after question, growing more and more concerned with every unanswered text. What she didn't know was that her daughter had become something of a recluse. After more than 20 messages went unanswered, the elder McCoy hopped on a flight. 8 hours later she arrived. Sandra's house was dark, mail piled up in the letterbox. She knocked, no answer. Fumbling through her purse for a spare key, she stepped inside. A few nightlights glowed in the living room, but no Sandra. The house was in disarray, dishes unwashed, food left out. This wasn't Sandra. What really happened in Nevada? She whispered to herself. She descended the stairs to Sandra's bedroom, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, face stained with tears, hair unkempt, eyes filled with fear. Her mother crossed the room and pulled her close. It was only then that Sandra seemed to notice her. She grabbed on and let the tears loose, trying to explain through a choked, raspy voice about the chupacabra, about the nightmares, the ones that had been haunting her ever since she came home. Sandra spoke in a hushed voice. She described how the incident had unraveled her, how her dreams had become nightmares, how even in her waking hours she was fraught with anxiety, with dread. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night. She had stopped going to work. She showed up disheveled, dark circles carved beneath her eyes, until her boss finally made her take a leave of absence and suggested therapy. She went, but it wasn't helping. She couldn't forget those red eyes, that eerie howl. They followed her everywhere. Mrs. McCoy sat and listened. She listened to everything, every detail of that night, every word Sandra had said to Laura before she disappeared, crying, shaking, fighting back both anger and sadness. She held her daughter tightly, and she tried to reassure her. "Stop blaming yourself," she said softly. "You could not have changed anything. There was no way of knowing she would walk off into that desert." Sandra's voice broke. "I tried, Mom, but I can't let go. Those glowing red eyes." Seeing her daughter, increasingly consumed by fear, unable to cope, Mrs. McCoy made a decision. Sandra was coming home, back to her parents, back to some sense of normalcy, or at least, that was the hope. Cal Newitt, on the other hand, had tried a different approach. He buried it, threw himself into his post-military life, the gym, his family, anything that kept his hands busy and his mind occupied. He and his wife Ramona were expecting their 5th child, and with every heartbeat came a cold rush of sweat. Even the joy of a new baby couldn't lift the dark cloud that seemed to hang over him. He told himself it was nothing, that what he thought he'd seen was just his mind playing tricks. The desert, the booze, the cold night air. It had lulled him into something irrational, something that had no place in the mind of a military man. Silly, he thought. Silly to let an old story get the better of me. Ramona tried to ease his anxiety. They walked the beaches of North Carolina together, their 2 Labrador retrievers bounding ahead of them. He took up golf, cycling, anything to channel the restless energy that had taken up residence inside him. But then came the dream. He woke in a cold sweat, swirling vortexes, distorted voices, eerie chanting, images so disturbing, so unlike anything he had ever seen or heard in all his life, that he lay there in the dark, unable to make sense of any of it. It brought him back to being a child, back to locking himself in his bedroom closet while his parents fought, arms wrapped around his knees, earmuffs pressed over his ears, wishing he could disappear somewhere far away. As the weeks passed, the nightmares grew more intense. He started getting out of bed at midnight, walking the quiet, lamp-lit streets of his neighborhood alone, for weeks. And Ramona never knew. Her pregnancy had deepened her sleep so much that even a jolt couldn't wake her. He would look at her sometimes, so peaceful, so happy. I wish I could be, he thought. He had been fooling himself, but just as his depression began to lift, just as his son Michael was born and he and Ramona found something like harmony again, the clock was already ticking. 1 week. 1 week before he was due to return to Nevada. He steeled himself. He swore the nightmares wouldn't follow him back. He had to do this. For his family. He was no coward. But what Cal knew it didn't know was that what he was about to face would be the absolute antithesis of everything he thought he knew, everything he had been taught, in Sunday school, in the military, in life. And Bloodlines. Chupacabra, Chapter 5, Part 3.